I gave a whole series of talks on this, and I've been thinking about the technology for it as well. Something I call the pseudonymous economy. So the thing is that real names weren't built for the internet. Real names are actually a technology. In fact, real names are a stolen base in many ways. Even the term real name is a stolen base. It's better called a state name or a social security name because it's a global identifier. It's an identifier that anybody can type into a database and pull up all kinds of information on you. And this is something where historically past cultures understood that giving out someone's real name was actually very bad, or knowing it, you had power over that person. The reason is that if you read this book, Seeing Like a State.
Seeing Like a State.
Yeah, Seeing Like a State. So this is a great book by Yale University Press that essentially talks about how names were developed to, among other things, simplify the process of conscription. So rather than, that guy over there with brown hair, which is an analog identifier that could refer to a bunch of folks and that was imprecise, instead you'd say John Davison. And that first name, last name was it's not perfect, it's not quite as good as a number, but it's a reasonably good digital identifier where you could go down a list and cross it off. And the thing is that would not just be conscription, you couldn't have even executed like Leninist redistribution of property very easily without those lists. It was all about the lists. Literacy is what actually enabled a big chunk of that. You had lists of names, that guy's rich, that guy's not rich, take his property, etc. So the point being that the alternative to real names, or like a single global identifier and everything, is pseudonyms, search-resistant identities, which people are already using at large scale. There's 400 million pseudonyms, or pseudonymous users on Reddit. And by the way, there's a distinction between anonymous, pseudonymous, and real name. Anonymous is totally disposable identifier. That's like the culture of 4chan. That actually is kind of a pit. Pseudonymous, like Reddit, is a persistent pseudonym that accumulates reputation, but that is at a distance from your global identifier. In general, what I think is the Peace of Westphalia at the end of our 30 years internet war is going to be...
Hold on, pause for definition. If I could click on do you say Westphalia?
Yeah, so from 1618 to 1648, Protestants and Catholics slugged it out over religion, but also over power. Who's going to rule the Catholic Church, or Martin Luther's guys, the disciples of Protestants. Very bloody war, lots of killing. And it was basically centralization versus decentralization, among other things. And eventually the truce that came about was the so-called Peace of Westphalia, which established the modern nation state. I don't mean to drop an obscure reference, and there's lots of areas of history that I don't know about, but this is one that I think about a lot because it's highly relevant, I think, to the present day in many, many different ways. Arguably, the 30 Years' War arose out of the introduction of the printing press, because you could go and mimeograph, all of Martin Luther's stuff and spread to people, and that's how, you did the software install, boom, into people's brains, and that's Protestant Reformation. Distribution, took off. So this technology gave rise to this huge fight that essentially redrew the map, and the concept of the nation state was born out of that, which is, okay, you don't have these transnational entities that just can have influence everywhere. Instead, we're going to have these sort of geographically defined areas that have a sovereign government with a monopoly of violence, and a religion can't just walk in there and just start bossing people around. There's like a lawful government. That was the truce that people came to. You stay in your lane, I stay in mine, just out of all the bloodshed and to stop the bloodshed. So I think we've just began, hopefully there's not bloodshed or not much of it. I think we've just begun. People think we're ending it, but I think we've just begun the global internet, like Cold War, where all of these social networks, currency networks compete for ideological and economic dominance around the world because they can just spread virally back and forth like this. And everyone will be trying to cancel each other and whatnot. It's going to be this crazy, crazy thing. For example, one thing I anticipate will happen sometime in the 2020s is, I think in some country, probably the US, for lots of reasons, I think the cloud will burst. And what I mean by that is like Treasury was just recently hacked with the SolarWinds thing. People don't know what they got. They could have gotten every tax return. They could have gotten all kinds of very sensitive stuff. And
it was hacked with what? I'm sorry.
Oh, SolarWinds is sort of the name of the hack. And,
I see. Got it.
And the scope of it is not fully understood. It's like this total ownage of all kinds of government systems. And this is not the first time this has happened. It's also happened at the government of Texas and so on and so forth. I'm not pointing at any particular entity. The main thing is when there was a recent hack of Ledger, the crypto company, their database was just blasted on the internet. And you could actually, I wasn't a customer, but people could see their name and their home address on the internet and they're like a crypto fanatic who has a hardware wallet on there.
What a nightmare. What a nightmare. Oh my God.
And so it is like this thing where, you don't, you can't easily change your home. I mean, some people can.
Yeah,
but
suddenly you have guys in tracksuits showing up at your house.
Potentially. Exactly. It's like a rank ordered list of who holds crypto. Really, really, really sucks. May lead to home invasions, other kinds of things. Very bad piece of information to have out there. It's an enriched list. So it's hard for, the thing is, even discussing it, I hate bringing more attention to it. On the other hand, it's also something which has important consequences. And one of the consequences is that shows it's not a theoretical risk to think about what these hacks could be. So far, people have talked about hacks kind of in the abstract. But once a government database is hacked and all of this surveillance on us is just blasted out on the internet, the cloud bursts. Whether it's
what does that mean?
Like
by the cloud
all
bursting?
Facebook DMs rain down. All Slacks rain down, something like that.
Rain
happens.
Down meaning are suddenly searchable and available
Suddenly
for
searchable and available,
consumption.
WikiLeaks style. Exactly. Now, when that happens, the defense that people are going, now it'll cause all kinds of crazy stuff. Basically, it's not so much that you'll see fires and electrical outages and so on, but like all kinds of social damage will be caused, low trust, relationships broken, all that type of stuff, like the tearing of the social fabric. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, not to mention that even if you feel like you have nothing to hide, and this is an issue with a lot of Surveillance Act bills and things like that, if suddenly every lawmaker, every member of Congress has dirt on them, I mean, the destabilizing effect is non-trivial.
It's non-trivial. Now, there's an argument that when everybody's naked, no one is. Some people may make that
argument. Right, sure. But it doesn't all happen at once. That's the thing, right? It's not all discovered simultaneously nor distributed simultaneously.
Exactly. That's right. And if you look at what happened during the Sony hack and so on, this is like a preview of that. And so the answer, I think, is we're going to need to build a pseudonymous economy where over the medium to long term, you separate out your real name, your earning name, and your speaking name. And in fact, you have multiple earning names and multiple speaking names, just like you have multiple usernames at different sites. Crypto is a crucial component of this because it allows you to earn pseudonymously. And with a recent innovation that, I haven't coded it up, but I've got like the white paper level description of it, would let you transfer reputation from one pseudonym to another. So one issue right now, just to frame the problem, is you may have a bunch of reputation, followers, or karma, for example, under a username, even a pseudonym. If you boot up another pseudonym, it starts at absolutely zero, which is one of the big things that stop people from doing it. Let's say, for example, you have a large Twitter following and you boot up a new pseudonym. That pseudonym starts with nothing. And so it takes you time to boot up like a new following. That's a whole effort that deters a lot of people from doing it. They're starting all the way from scratch. And, I thought about this problem and how to, because the thing is that with cryptocurrency, we've actually solved this where you can set up a username and another username, and you can use Zcash to transfer money from one name to another pseudonymously. So money can be transferred. Reputation, though, didn't seem to be, until I realized that actually you might not be able to do it for followers, which are non-fungible. That is to say, one person is not like the same as the other. But you could do it on a site like Reddit, where you had karma that was accumulated. And so someone who had 10,000 karma under one pseudonym, just like you use Zcash to transfer digital currency, Zcash is basically like the truly anonymous version of Bitcoin, truly private version of Bitcoin. Just like you use Zcash to transfer cash from one name to another, you could use Zkarma to transfer karma from one username to another, and thereby reboot under a new username. Okay. And that username would have no comment history, but people would be like, okay, that's a 50,000 karma person or whatever the number is. Clearly that's somebody who our community esteems to some extent, has been upvoted a lot. Perhaps we should listen to what they have to say because they felt they had to go into a pseudonym for this. And of course you could do this with not just a global karma, but subreddit specific karma. You accumulate all this karma in the historian subreddit or the mathematician subreddit or something like that. You have something controversial to get off your chest. You can say it this way. That's one dimension of the pseudonymous economy. I think another dimension is basically that people, just like you don't give out your password, I think it's going to become less and less and less common for people to give out the mapping between their physical body and their usernames online. Like you may not even tell your wife. just like, people often.
When you mean physical mapping, that just means you're not going to correlate those two things for someone.
That's right. Exactly. Right. So essentially it will be considered a faux pas. And we're already moving towards this, right? Like there's this YouTuber whose name I forget, whose like shtick is that he's like a faceless guy, like faceless horror or something like that. What's his name? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know, but we'll find it and put it in the show notes.
Okay, yeah. So this guy's name, Corpse Husband.
Corpse Husband.
Ever heard of him? Okay.
CORPSE Husband.
Yeah, Corpse Husband. So this guy with this super deep voice, he sounds like this, like a I can't even mimic it. This guy with the super deep voice who's never shown his face. So Corpse Husband, basically, he's quasi anonymous. He's given away his audio, but not his video. And I think that stuff like that. I mean, I think what's going to happen sooner than we think, probably by 2025, 2030 latest, is you'll have filters on your Zoom that are not simply like, oh, my background is San Francisco or whatever, but audio and video filters so that you sound and look like a different person. And that will be like the equivalent of clothes.
The FBI informant filter, something like that.
Or it's just something where people don't need to know who you are. And here's where I think why I call this the Piece of Westphalia. I think at the end of this, rainbow is not the right metaphor, but this journey, pseudonymity stops both discrimination and cancellation. So it's not ideal, but it is accepted and widely used by people of all political persuasions. And so it's sort of like a mutual disarmament where you can't cancel somebody. The only thing you can do is judge them by what they're saying. You can't discriminate against somebody. You don't even know what their immutable characteristics are. And so that's actually, I think, an acceptable truce to many parties. Not a great one, but it's the total opposite of bring your full self to work, Google stuff, or whatever. It's actually the total opposite trade-off, which is minimum necessary self. And I think this goes hand in hand with a future world where there's more tasking, more micro work, less full-time jobs, and so on. Some of the stuff, obviously, you've touched on many times.